Hi, I'm Tiger Craven Ely. I'm a retired California educator. I taught 30 years, 1993 to 2024. That's 31 years, but I took a year off to get my master's in counseling. That was a bucket list item. Anyway, 15 years approximately in the closet, and then 15 years out of the closet. And I just feel like it's my civic duty to talk about those experiences, especially as I see in the world today the persecution of LGBT people and the ignorance and the misunderstanding. So my goal is to read a book that you might share in your classroom. This is geared toward educators. Read a book, share some stories about my teaching experience being a gay teacher, and often encountering gay students who'd come out of the closet and share with me. And then also, thirdly, just talking about some of the laws or the guidelines to the California Department of Education, especially those in California. With that, I want to go ahead and read Pride is Love. The author is Dano Moreno, illustrated by Nakul P, Nakul. Pride is love. Pride is discovering. You can do marvelous things. Pride is remembering you're allowed to make mistakes. And she made a necklace with flowers and it broke. Pride is believing you are enough, exactly as you are. Pride is speaking up. Your ideas are important. That's having a voice. That's having agency. And I hope that's what you're doing in your classrooms. Giving your students voice, giving them their agency. Pride is helping. Your kindness is a gift. Certainly we want to encourage kindness in our classrooms. Pride is knowing you have nothing to hide. And your LGBT kids shouldn't have anything to hide. Your LGBT teachers, your LGBT parents, administrators should not have anything to hide. LGBT people from history should not be censored out of the curriculum. Pride is celebrating. You make the world brighter just by being you. And there's a little trans flag. Our trans population is really under attack unjustly today. I'm not talking about fringe political topics like trans in sports. That's distracted us from the real issue of human rights, of respecting people who choose to identify in a gender that's other than their cisgender. Pride is love. You deserve it always. Pride is believing you are enough exactly as you are. Anyway, a wonderful book. What I love about the book, one thing I wanted to, that I really like, is it talked about pride as you have nothing to hide. And I just wanted to emphasize as LGBT people in the classroom, we shouldn't have to hide. And how that's discrimination, by the way. So my experience teaching in California is seeing heterosexual teachers being able to celebrate heterosexuality. I was going to class one day, this lady was standing outside her classroom. This was at a high school. I taught at a high school. And I said, hello, I'm Mr. C. May I help you? She said, yeah, I'm waiting for my husband. He's a teacher here. I'm here to sing happy birthday and lead the class in singing happy birthday. So here she is, a woman standing in front of the class saying, here's my husband. We're heterosexual. She's not saying it explicitly, but they're not having to hide that. And on that teacher's wall, by the way, he didn't have only a picture. He had a mural. It was a mural of he and his wife and all the countries they've explored. And then there was another mural of he and his sons and all the countries they've explored. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if they can express their heterosexuality, I certainly should be able to have a picture of my spouse on my classroom. Or if students say, what did you do this weekend? I should be able to say, yeah, my husband and I did this, or my husband and I did that. And that's where discrimination, that's what I experienced in the classroom. I had a principal who brought her husband, and nothing's wrong with this, who brought her husband to share to the entire population his profession. And then I had a third grade teacher neighbor, she brought her husband in to share about being an artist to her class, her third graders. And nothing's wrong with that. But this heterosexuality, they're not hiding that they have heterosexual relationships. I had a vice principal, she brought her teenage children to help out at a carnival we were having. Children, that's heterosexuality, and there's nothing wrong with it. But then we shouldn't be oppressed as LGBT people. I would receive letters. My students would ask me, I said, I'm getting married to a wonderful man in Berkeley. And next thing I know, letters are coming up in my email saying, please don't share too much of your personal life. What? Here I'm watching YouTube videos of heterosexual couples proposing in the classroom, and I'm getting letters when I mention my... But anyway, I don't want to get on that too much. I want to share a book, share classroom stories. I've shared some. Wanted to share this one story. Yesterday I shared in my 6th grade classroom when I first came out around 2010, 11. And I was kind of out before because I wasn't hiding any effeminate mannerisms. But this was the first time I actually had spoken something explicitly identifying myself as LGBT. And my student had asked, what are you doing this summer? I said, I'm spending it with someone very special. They said, your girlfriend? I said, no, my boyfriend. He brought in one of his friends. They were like 12 years old. She identified as lesbian. She said, Mr. C, can I share with you? I have the same problem you have. So I shared that story yesterday, and we talked about resources and things. But at the same school, same grade level, a couple of years later, they had a student, and I've had many of these students that they present themselves as effeminate, not on purpose, but this student didn't like to play sports. He hung out with the girls. He would bring stuffed animals. He spoke in a soft, kind of a feminine tone. Anyway, he went to recess. He comes back in from recess and he's crying. Mr. C, Maria, and Robert call me gay. Poor kid. And I said, I was thinking, well, hello, spade is a spade. But I certainly didn't say that. But I thought, go get Maria, go get Robert, bring them in. So they came in, I think Miguel went out. And I said, and I knew they were friends. And Maria was like, Mr. C, we meant happy gay. I'm like, no. You didn't mean happy gay. And I said, I know you're Miguel's friend, aren't you, right? And they said, yeah, and they were friends. I said, you're recognizing something in Miguel that he's a little different, and when you go to junior high next year, he'll probably be teased, hopefully not bullied, but a little bit teased, and he's going to need his friends like you to be there for him, watching out for him. Anyway, that's our job, to protect. I think there's a Seth law was passed in 2012. So not only generally for everyone, but especially for LGBT kids, we have a duty to protect, not to ignore those things. When kids are saying faggot in the classroom, we're just stop. Excuse me. Teaching junior high school, I remember I used to go to the Pride support group meetings at the Pride Center, and I had friends there, and one was a lesbian lady, and another one was a trans man. But the lesbian lady's son wasn't in my classroom. He was in the after-school program. They came in to borrow my classroom, and I was watching them. I'm sitting there preparing for the next day, and I heard the kids around them started using the faggot word, faggot this, faggot, and the adults didn't say anything. And I'm thinking, that's their job. your job is to stop. Excuse me, we don't use that as a put down. And then my trans friend, cis female, born female, and then identifying as male, his sister was in my classroom. And anyway, I don't remember a lot of specifics about that, but I just remember just thinking, you know what, we're here. We are in a gay teacher, lesbians, son, trans, sister. We are here and should be represented in the classroom. So I read the story. I told you a couple stories of my own. I have one more story I wanted to share. So in Modesto, they had this thing called Day of Respect. They would invite minorities from the community, and some people would argue that, well, LGBT is not a culture. We are a culture. We have a shared language. We have a shared history. We have shared political concerns. We have shared financial similarities. Shared health. So we are a culture. So they would invite. I got invited a couple times to speak about my experience being LGBT, being a minority. And I went into, it was a world lit class, world literature, and they had posters of Oscar Wilde on the wall. And I asked the students, do you know that Oscar Wilde was gay? And they said, no, they didn't know. They had studied Oscar Wilde, but the teacher did not. They censored out the fact that he was gay. So Oscar Wilde was gay, and he was put in prison for 2 years, hard labor, because he was caught in an act with a homosexual act. And they used his literature as evidence to prove that he was gay. That's pretty significant. And then later he wrote more literature based on his experiences being in prison. So how would you teach about that kind of author without mentioning he's LGBT? And that just takes me, I wanted to remind people of laws. And so one of the, and guidelines, not really a law, I think, but in the California Department of Education, History, Social Studies framework, they have a chapter on access and equity, similar chapter in the English language arts framework. Just some good reminders to teachers. We want to recognize cultural differences. So we want to recognize we have LGBT kids in the classroom, make sure our materials reflect that in the art, literature, songs, textbooks, posters, like Oscar Wilde. And then we want to make sure we increase students' access to inclusive curriculum, like Senate Bill 48, where we're supposed to highlight positive contributions of LGBT people. Oscar Wilde certainly would be someone who's contributed to our culture. Make available and share age-appropriate literature, like the book I read, Pride is Love. Oops, excuse me. We're not having an earthquake. I am in California. Teach students by example and through discussion. So when I shared, I was getting married to shared to my students, I'm getting married to a nice man, and they went, ooh, time for discussion. My student said the faggot word, hey, time for discussion. You see your students teasing each other and so on. Your students need to feel safe. All students need to feel safe. So I wanted to remind you about those laws, Senate Bill 48, Assembly Bill 329. I wanted to just do a quick, I'm almost done. This book, copywritten 1953, you go through here, you will notice that all the characters are white. And in my teacher preparation, they explained to us, we don't want to use this kind of curriculum in the classroom because it doesn't represent all students, right? We have Asian students, Latino students, Black students, Middle Eastern students. We would not use this. Well, in the same light, not all our students are heterosexual. 3 to 5%. Also, if you look at what many liberal groups would say, they would say we have 10% of our population is LGBT. And then you have the opposite on the other side of the spectrum. You have groups like Focus on the Family. By the way, I'm not evangelical. I was for many years. I'm more agnostic now. And I used to use Focus on the Family literature with my own kids, like McGee and me. So that conservative Christian group, Focus on the Family, at least, and they would recognize, they would say this, they would counter the 10%. They would say, liberal groups say there's 10%, and that's not accurate, it's more like 3%. But I want to say at least they recognize there's a constant natural variation in our society. If you take 100 babies in any country, Russia, China, United States, in each set of 100, you're going to have 3 to 5 of those babies later identifying as LGBT. It's a natural variation, kind of like being left-handed. So we want to represent those numbers. Out of a class of 30, you will statistically have 1 to 2 or 3 children who are LGBT, and represent them, fight for them, defend them. If you're gay, don't model being ashamed. Be out. I think that's it. I wanted to do a remembrance. I don't know, these are long videos, I know. My hope is that this will be useful to a teacher or teacher preparation program, beginning of the year, or if you're trying, there are new laws where you're supposed to have LGBT training, you want to use these videos. I know they're amateur videos, but you're welcome to do that. I want to end with a remembrance of Ronin Shimizu. He was 12 years old, and he was gender nonconforming. He's a little kid, little youth that liked to make his own clothes, he liked to design his own clothes. He was a cheerleader, and he was teased relentlessly, and his parents took him out of the public school, and tragically he ended up committing suicide. But I can't help but thinking if that school would have, and there were laws then, implemented Senate Bill 48, where you highlight positive contributions of some fashion designers, Calvin Klein, Versace, I can't remember, Ralph Lauren, highlight the positive things these designers had done. And then also Assembly Bill 329, the sex ed law, where you're supposed to teach the negative aspects of gender stereotyping. If they would have taught the children, and we don't tease people when they are boys who are cheerleaders. Anyway, thank you. God bless our students in California and across the country. Remember, 3 to 5%, doesn't matter. Even if you disagree with this, those statistics, your own children, your own grandchildren, your own nieces and nephews, there will be LGBT kids there. Anyway, I've said enough. God bless. Thank you for listening.